Many of us who are Christians feel intimidated when talking with skeptics. We fear we won't have the right answers, we worry the conversation will turn awkward, or even cost us a friendship. But often these fears stem from a mistaken assumption that we're supposed to be walking encyclopedias who are fully ready to defend the faith on command. What if, instead of feeling pressure to give answers, we started by asking good questions? Questions can disarm, clarify, and invite further thought without requiring us to have everything figured out. In the book of Acts, Paul engaged in something similar. To be sure, Paul would often preach boldly, even for an extended length of time. But at the same time, he also engaged in other forms of teaching. For example, Acts 17 verse 2 says, "And Paul went in, as was his custom, and on 3 Sabbath days he reasoned with them from the Scriptures." When it says Paul reasoned, that Greek word is closely connected to the English word dialogue. The word means to discuss, to mingle thought with thought. What did this look like for Paul? I can imagine he would share one point, hear a counterpoint, ask some clarifying questions, and then proceed. Paul would go back and forth. This is something Paul did on a regular basis. In fact, this Greek word is used several more times to describe how he talked with people. So how do we do this? Let's look at 3 basic kinds of questions that can open up spiritual conversations and keep us from putting people on the defensive. I'll say before we get into this that I highly recommend the book called Tactics by Greg Koukl. This book walks through these kinds of things in more detail, and it changed the way I have conversations with anyone about anything. So the first kind of helpful question we can ask is, what do you mean by that? Rather than feeling the need to immediately respond to something someone says, it's super helpful to make sure we're on the same page and that we understand what they're really saying. We've all had times where someone didn't truly hear us, and then they responded to what they thought they heard, but it wasn't what we said or meant. We should be careful not to do that ourselves in our interactions with others. Asking this question also helps us think through what potential flaws the person might have in their thinking. When you give someone a moment to explain more what they mean, you get to hear more of their logic. This will help you know what to challenge when the time is right. Imagine someone comes to you and says, "Oh, you're a Christian? Don't you know that all religions are basically the same because they all teach that we should love?" We might feel the temptation to swiftly respond with 5 reasons that they're wrong. But what if we reframed this conversation by asking questions? We could ask, "What do you mean by love?" We could ask, "What do you mean by all religions?" Asking these questions would help us dial in and ensure we're responding to what they really believe. It would help us be more precise and make for a more productive conversation overall. A second kind of question that can be helpful is to ask, how did you reach that conclusion? If someone makes a claim, they need to be able to back it up. We need to be interested in the route someone took to reach their convictions. Asking a question like this helps the person back up what they're saying. In asking this, they may realize they haven't thought through why they believe what they believe, or you may hear a well-thought-out reason for their convictions that helps you better talk with that person. So what are some instances where this could work? Well, for one, imagine someone says, "The Bible has many contradictions and can't be trusted." Rather than immediately refuting their claim with why the Bible can be trusted, we could ask, how did you reach that conclusion? You want to know if this person has genuinely wrestled with the contradiction they saw in Scripture, or if they're just parroting something that they saw online. Here's a second scenario. Imagine someone says, "My professor says we're missing books of the Bible." Rather than explaining all the reasons this isn't true, try asking, how did he reach that conclusion? We don't want to trust someone simply because they're a professor. Instead, we want to know the reasons they reached that conclusion and then deal with those reasons. So a third kind of question is a "have you considered" type of question. This implies you have a point that you want to make, but it's framed as a question. We might not always know a point that we want to express, so we would keep asking variations of "what do you mean by that?" and "how did you reach that conclusion?" After asking enough questions like these, you'll be able to eventually ask a leading question that makes a point. If you're wondering what this looks like in real life, imagine you're talking with a skeptic who believes in equal human rights. It's great that they believe in equal human rights, but their worldview says the human species came about from the strong eating the weak. What would be a good leading question to ask? Perhaps this: have you wondered why, if we came about from the strong eating the weak, we need to believe in equal human rights? In other words, you're helping them see their worldview doesn't support their values. Here's another example. Imagine you're talking with a skeptic who hasn't really thought about the reasons to trust in the Bible. You could ask, have you considered fulfilled prophecies in Scripture as evidence for believing in the Bible? This question assumes you know something about these fulfilled prophecies and could show them these things. As Christians, it's natural for us to be eager to share all the reasons and arguments for our beliefs. We might find, however, that if we take a step back and engage in dialogue and asking questions, we can have a more productive conversation that's less intimidating to others. In another video, we'll look at some questions that can be used to get conversations going in a spiritual direction.